Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today, we're pleased to have with us the Salt Lake School District Athletic Director, Missy Mackay-Whiteurs, CAA. Welcome to the podcast, Missy.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be invited.
Well, let's have you start by sharing with our audience where you grew up, where you went to college, your first job, those types of things.
Well, I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, over in Holiday. We just sold my parents' house after 65 years because they both had passed away. So went to Skyline High School, and I went to the University of Utah, and I went and then finished it. One of my bachelor's at Weber State. Went to Prescott College to get my teaching certification, and then the University of Phoenix to get my admin degree. And so I could become an administrator. And then I went to Skyline High School, and of course, athletics back in the 70s were not really big for women back then. So there were very few things for us to pick from.
So if you don't mind my asking, when did you graduate from Skyline?
1974.
74. So football was still king at Skyline, and everything else, including women's sports, just kind of paled in comparison.
Exactly. So in that time, they didn't have softball for women in the high schools around that time. At least we were up at Skyline, and I loved to play softball. So my church had softball that we were able to play. And that's what kept me interested in sports and going to church, was being able to have to play so I could play softball. That's where I ended up going up to the University of Utah, and I played 2 years of up there at the U on the softball team. And back in 74, 75, and then 75 through 76.
Was Norma there then? Was she the coach?
Yeah. No, she wasn't the coach then. She had just left. It was Sandy Beveridge then.
Oh, Sandy. So I had no idea. Sandy Beveridge was my advisor when I was at the U. I had no idea that she had taken over as the softball coach. Small world. There you go.
Yep.
And so tell us how then you got involved. I want to talk more a little bit later on about the Title IX thing, but tell us. So you're at the U. You wound up at Phoenix to get your administrator's degree. How did you get into coaching and then on to being an athletic administrator?
Well, I got into coaching because I loved athletics. And so I started through my church, being a coach for volleyball, basketball, softball. And then as it became more recreational, I also played rec ball, softball out at the Miller Park on 13th. And so I helped coach. Then my children came along, and their dad was in athletics. So I coached both my daughters through softball and basketball. And then my son through soccer and basketball until he was embarrassed of having his mother coaching him. And so that's how I got started. And then I went into teaching. I do have an accounting degree. And it was actually Janet Thurgood. Do you remember Janet?
I remember Jan very well.
So she was one of my great mentors, along with Sandy Beveridge. She was the assistant coach also for us up at the U for softball. And Janet, I ran into her in the 80s, and she said, "Why did you never finish your PE degree?" And I looked at her and I gave her my reasons, and she says, "That's not good enough. We'll see you next quarter." So I left and went back. I had my own accounting practice, and so I went back to the U and up to Weber State and finished my PE degree, and left accounting behind me. so that I could get back into sports.
It's interesting that you mentioned Jan. I will just share this as a sidelight. One of the great things I remember Jan for was so it's the second day of class, and this is at college now, and there's a bunch of us in her class. She knew all of our names. And I remember once I began teaching high school, we had a name quiz at the end of the first week for everybody in my class, and including me. And we would go over, because I wanted to make sure that, well, it was mostly for me because I need to make sure that I could look at a kid and remember what their name was.
Right.
But I thought it was so important that students refer to themselves by their first names rather than hey you or hey what's the answer type of a thing. And it's strange. You bring up someone from my past, but that's one thing that I always remember from her. So that was a great thing. So you mentioned Sandy, you mentioned Jan. Any other mentors or parents that you want to mention, that bosses that may have inspired you along the way?
Yes, my grandmother, my mom's mother, she was an awesome mentor to me. She played as the catcher for the Shamrocks, and until she got pregnant with my mother, and then she ended up giving up ball. But all that time, through all those years, she inspired me to keep playing. And that's where I got the love for softball, was because we'd play it out in her yard, and grandma was always right there with us. And my mom was a great athlete, even though she'd had polio from 5 up to 16 years old. When she finally got out of her orthopedic shoes, mom had a leg that was shorter than the other one because of her polio. But because of what my grandmother did for her to get her through all those years in helping her with her therapy, mom had 3 hole-in-ones. She'd bowled to 300. She was a great bowler. She bowled for 50 years. I used to play tennis with her. She and I used to bowl on with the women's bowling leagues for nationals and stuff. And between my mom and my grandma, they were the ones who encouraged me. Plus, I had a great grandmother who was very athletic and refused. And she was also a great woman for women's rights. She was one of the first women to picket for women's rights in Utah. So I had some strong women in my life.
Well, so for some of our younger viewers, when you say the Shamrocks, I know who they are, but I need you to just to expand on that and to explain what that is, because I would think anybody who's under the age of 45 has no idea what you're talking about.
And well, that was one of the first women's league softball during the time of the wars, and when all the men were away. And so a league of your own, I watch that over and over again and cry every time when I see that last scene of them walking in, because I picture my grandmother walking in and being able to see her picture as one of the women who were playing on like a league of your own, of their own.
Very good. Let me ask you this, Missy. What's your biggest failure, and what did you learn from it?
I think my biggest failure was, I was thinking about that question because I've had a lot, but I think one of them is that I stopped playing softball after 2 years at the U. This goes into Title IX, so maybe we could talk about it right now. And that is that at the time I started playing for the U, we only had one scholarship for the whole department of PE. And the men, of course, had tons. Well, Title IX was starting into play, and they took away they added more sports to us and gave us more scholarships and took away men's sports that from up at the U. I remember when wrestling was taken away, and that really hurt. And so I think that my failure is that I became intimidated by a lot of the girls that they were recruiting. They were great softball players. And so what I learned from it is that I needed to put more work into it and be less afraid of the competition that was coming. And so after that, I was always kicked myself for not continue playing, and took the easy way out. And since then, I learned not to give up anymore after that. I needed to keep putting in the work. And I think that's where I keep pushing myself. Don't give up so easily.
Very good. Let me ask you, while we're on that topic, what were some of the teammates you had? Because I'll bet that they possibly might be mutual acquaintances.
Jan Vigas, Laura, started the P Page.
Okay. Did Becky Anderson play with you?
Yeah.
Or was she after you?
Actually, she was after me. Becky actually went to high school and junior high with me. I knew Becky very well from junior high and high school. So when I saw her down at Utah High School Association, it was exciting, because I was glad to see Becky, where she and I both took a lot of the similar paths.
Well, as you know, she was the first woman hired by the UHSAA.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And so I think that it makes me excited when I see the women coming in and being used more in and being leaders in our sports. When I was in high school, we didn't have a track team. Women's track wasn't that big. And so do you remember Coach Craig Poole?
Oh, yes.
So he taught over at Skyline, and he was the track coach there. And
before he went to BYU then?
Right before he went to BYU.
Okay.
Dating a guy that used to be on his team. And so I started running track with this boyfriend, an old boyfriend. And so I asked Craig, I said, we need to hold a women's track meet. So he arranged for us. I don't know who it was through, but we were able to have the Valley high schools come over to Skyline, and we were able to host a one-day track meet for women and for all the girls in the Valley with all the high schools that wanted to participate. And it was really fun because it was only a one-day track meet, but at least it was a start for us in being able to open up a lot of doors, especially in women's sports, and being able to bring more in as Title IX came in and opening up those areas for girls.
Well, let me follow up then, because one of the things I want to talk about later, and we'll talk about it right now, everyone knows that the 50th anniversary of Title IX is coming up next year in half a year or so. Mm-hmm. And you've talked a little bit about how it's affected you, but you were really, I don't know if pioneer is the right word, but so it came in 72, and by 75, 76, you're playing at the university. So you're really that first generation of females that saw at least the start of Title IX, because I think when you talk to the young girls now, they played basketball, they played soccer, they played softball their whole life. It's just always been there for them. They've not known what it's like to not have it. So talk about and reflect on how that's affected you in some other ways.
Well, again, my great grandmother was one of the first women to pick up for women's rights here in Utah. So the women in my family have been pretty strong. My great grandmother went to college when they wouldn't let women go to college that were married, and she had 10 children. She went under her maiden name, got a teaching degree, and back then it was only a couple of years. She invited her coach or her professors down to her house, and she looked and had all 10 children there, and she said to him, "Now you tell me a married woman can't go to college." So I've always kind of used that, and she was very strong and very determined that the women in our family were strong and that we could do anything that we set out to do. So with Title IX, having lived through it and seeing what the doors that it opened made me really excited for the time that I would have had children, when I'd have children later, to be able to see that my daughters could do exactly what some of the stuff I couldn't do. We have girls basketball. We didn't have, and like I said, girls track. We didn't have, there was just certain sports that you could play: volleyball, tennis, ski, but now look at it. We've got girls wrestling that's involved. You've been involved with the semi-pro girls football team, look what it's brought. It's taken 50 years to get us where we are now, which to me is sad in a lot of ways, but I'm glad to see that my daughters did not have to go through the same types of roadblocks that I had to because of Title IX not being in play until my second year in college there.
Excellent. Let me ask you this. You're one of the few people I know that has been a building athletic administrator and also a district athletic administrator. So speak to our audience, both here in Utah and nationally, about, because I think most of them are building ADs, but what are some of the big differences between a district athletic director and a building athletic director?
I was talking to my ADs, and I just had our professional development. And I think one of the biggest differences is I don't have to go to the games every Friday night, and I'm not an event coordinator anymore. And now I'm a fireman. I get to put out a lot of the fires that come around. I miss the kids. Because now over at Highland, I've been 4 years in my position. All my kids have graduated. So when I go to a game or that, nobody knows me. They don't know who. So I think that being involved as a building AD was awesome. But you are an event coordinator, you're putting everything together, but you also get to still work with all of the kids. And you become very familiar with them because of our registrar, our athlete, and having to try to get some of our kids through for grades, when we're trying to put them through eligibility, trying to get transfers through, because that will help the student. That's the emotional social learning part that we as educators have, that we need. You can see that with kids. And so I do miss a lot of that. So now as a district administrator, and I think I'm the only female district AD in Utah, if I'm correct.
I'm trying to think of the district ADs that I know, and I'm pretty sure that is correct.
Yeah. And so I feel really good about that, because it's opened up some doors. I'm hoping it opens up more and more doors, for the ADs behind me. But as being an admin in it means more paperwork that way, district wise. But I don't work straight with the kids, but I do work with the athletic administrators, the ADs, and I work with the coaches. And so I've been able to have a little bit more one-on-one with the coaches of the whole district. So one thing that I really like is that I get all the district and with all the coaches and with all three schools. And I'm able to work with all of them. We had a meeting this morning with all of our coaches and went over, district policies and Title IX and some of the issues that we have. And so that's fun, because I'm still doing educating them, but I surely do miss the kids and, being involved with them and being able to celebrate with them at the end of a football game, because I knew them and I knew them personally.
Sure. Yeah, great answer. So let me ask you this then. Speak to, obviously when I first met you, but how someone, because not everyone knows, you were a building principal at one time before you became an AD, if I understand right. But now I want you to share with our audience your journey with the UIAAA, and then of course your journey with the NIAAA, which has actually got to be pretty big. So talk about how you began to be involved and encourage some of those out there to follow your path.
Well, when I was building admin, when I was principal of Salt Lake School for the Performing Arts, I was also the assistant principal here at Highland High School, and both at the same time. So when the athletic director's position came open at Highland, I said I would love to be athletic director. Now, it meant taking a big pay cut and moving down. So I left as a building admin and came back down and went back into teaching and became the AD. And it was my dream job, more than being a building principal or being an assistant principal in the district. It's just exciting because I was back involved in athletics, and I could be with it. I could feel my grandmother with me, my great grandmother, my mother, and being able to see the differences that you make in the lives of kids. So at my first year as AD, I was asked to be on the ADAC committee. And Dave Boyack called me and said, your name was given to me. I'll never forget, I called him back and he was on a golf course talking to me about it. And I said, And Kathy Butler was a friend of mine also. And so I said, what in the heck is this ADAC committee? And so she told me, and that's the year we were, my East and Highland were with Region 5. So we went up north for all of our games. And it was really fun to be on the ADAC because I got to meet so many more athletic administrators that way, and be able to make decisions that affected our athletics, and to be with the board. And then that's what started me going to nationals and to the UIAAA conferences, was because I saw what was available there for learning our LTI classes. And I was so excited about that because there really isn't any other PD for athletic administrators than our LTIs. Where else can you get a better a thing on the law, on sports law, than taking Lee Green's classes?
Oh, absolutely.
And so I served there with ADAC and ran a couple of times for president, and didn't make it. But now, since I got my CAA, I have my project done for my CMAA, and my goal is I hope to have that completed before we go to Denver in December. Is to be able to have that CMAA. My ADs are working on their CAAs. One has them. Danny Schwam only has 502 to take, which he'll take with us in September, by the way. And
yeah, I was going to say, the new AD workshop's coming up in about a month, so that's the perfect time to take it.
So he'll be taking that 502. That's the only class he needs to take his CAA. Skip Lowe took his last year. Rachel will take hers this year. And Monica French, who had been athletic director years ago here at Highland High School, she was Monica, of course, did never start any of those LTI classes. And so that was a real goal of mine, is that all of us have that, at least our CAAs. And so if my ADs have their CAAs, I need to have my CMAA being over them as their supervisor. And the accreditation is the same as what our national teachers come from. I mean, to me, it's just exciting that we have those advances that we're able to do. And what does it do for I think it helps build our athletic directors' confidence in being able to say, I have my certified athletic administration. It also brings, I think, more value on the position when we are able to say that we have finished those certifications.
Well, absolutely. A shout out to the Salt Lake District. I will brag a little bit about the Salt Lake District. Salt Lake District was actually the first 3 schools to receive the Quality Program Award. I think you may have, I'm trying to think who was at Highland. I know Kathy was at East at the time. I know Cece was in your job.
Yep.
But this has got to be, my goodness, it's over 10 years. I want to say it's maybe closer to 13 or 14 years ago that the three Salt Lake City School District schools were the first to receive the QPA. And of course, back then, I remember seeing binders that were this thick, and I guess I should say 3 or 4 inches thick because most people won't see this on YouTube. But now it's all electronic. But my goodness, I think there was 3 binders for each school. I mean, it was quite a project. So you're to be commended for that, for following along in those footsteps. Now, let me ask you, you talked a little bit about accreditation. I know you recently were named to the NIAAA Accreditation Committee. Speak to that a little bit and what that entails and about your history and why that fits so well with what you've done in your career.
Well, I was really excited to be asked to do that for the Section 7 because of having been in a principal in a building and also being on accreditation teams for the schools and in the state of Utah. I think that leads me into being able to, as an administrator, to do what have had training in and being able to do accreditations with our schools. And so that, to me, it was just another extension of my job that I missed as not being on those accreditations. And so, plus I've gone through accreditation when I was principal and know what it takes to have to get ready for those accreditations. And also then once you get to the schools, what we are looking for, and specifically, what are we making sure that our schools are meeting in the education of our students.
So speak to, this won't put you on the spot, but speak to the NIAAA, who is the only non-mortar organization that's accredited, because the NIAAA is actually nationally and to Canada and international now. And I remember I was on the board when they first got the accreditation back in 2011. But tell our rank and file ADs both in Utah and across the nation what a big deal this is and what that means.
It's a really big deal because once again, that gives us the accreditation gives value to what we are trying to do. It gives that we do have things in play, that we do have policies, we do have procedures, and that we don't take it lightly of our athletic directors just running amok, or that there are policies and procedures that we follow, that there are certain levels that we need to meet, and to be able to maintain that accreditation, we need to be able to stay up there. And that, I think it just gives more our program a greater what's the word I want to say? I keep saying value, but we have more respect that way.
There you go.
We have a lot more respect with being accredited. It's just not an association. It is, it's an actual working, like you said, non-mortar entity, but we stay within the parameters and stuff of being able to build a good athletic programs.
Very well said. Let me ask you this. What's one common myth about being an athletic director that you would like to debunk?
Oh, God. That all you do is go to games. That it's the easiest job anybody could have. If you are doing your job correctly, you are exhausted. If you are doing it the way that you should be. If an AD says, oh, I don't, it's the easiest job in the world, they're not doing their job correctly then. They are not being the event coordinator. They are not making sure their coaches are certified. They're not making sure their athletes are on Register My Athlete, or that they're not making sure. And one of the things I really am strong about is that we do not have coaches out there that are not registered on my Register My Coach. That is really strong in our district, is that to make sure that we do have all of our coaches that are registered and have done all of their trainings, and they are not to be out on the fields and on the courts unless they have done that. So I think that when I hear them say, oh, that was the easiest job I ever had, I thought, you didn't do it right then, because it is probably one of the toughest jobs I've had as being a building athletic director. And I think that's why it's important that schools have a full-time athletic AD. When I did it, it was half-time, but boy, that was a lot of work, a lot of work. Yeah. You got come at 6 o'clock in the morning, leave back at 10, 11 o'clock at night.
Exactly. Very well said. What's the favorite part of your job?
My job now?
Well, I'm guessing it's your job now and then, because you've already talked about how you miss the students, and I can see that. But yeah, I guess maybe another way to say it. What's the best part about being an AD?
The best part about being an AD as a district AD is that I'm able to work on a district level and have been able to bring more people into educating more of our administrators on what's important about athletics. So a couple of years ago, I was given also to have the middle school athletics fall under me, but then COVID hit, so we didn't have it. There's a great guy out at Clayton. His name is Lucas Tucker, who is taking that on this year. And he came to our coaches meeting this morning, and with Reed Anderson, that's up at Clayton Middle School, and looking at what we can do to build programs for our feeders. So such as track, There isn't a program that brings in feeders for track. There isn't one for wrestling. So how can we get those into our middle school so our kids, once they get in 9th grade and come to our high schools, are able to just go straight on instead of having to learn how to wrestle or learn what it is for track, but they've already got the desire to be able to do it. We've got that with basketball. We've got a feeder, even with volleyball, football. And so as a district athletic director, it's being able to see those programs to be able to feed into our high schools and build those for our youth too, so that they can feel the love for what we have going for that's in athletics for a lifetime, not just to get them through college, but just that it's a lifetime love.
Very well said.
Never let it go.
Yeah, I'm smiling. Of course, nobody can see this unless they're watching on YouTube. But when you mentioned Clayton, because you probably didn't know this, Clayton Intermediate School, it was Clayton Junior High back then, is when I did my student teaching in 1978, I guess it was, maybe.
Wow.
The spring of 70. And C.C. Sharman, who was at the U at the time, was my coordinating teacher when I was, I had a couple of math classes, and I think I had 2 math classes and 4 PE classes when I student taught at Clayton. And of course, it's been rebuilt now, but it's kind of a special place in my heart. That's excellent. Well, let me ask you this as we wind this down. If you had a suggestion for a new athletic administrator in my book is someone that's between 1 and 4 years. If you could give them 2 pieces of advice, what would those 2 things be in order for them to be successful?
I think the first thing I would advise is that they make sure that they go to any LTI classes that you guys offer through the UIAAA, and also to attend the national conventions, our conferences nationally, to be able to network with a lot of people, and ones who have been longer at the job, has been probably the most helpful that I had as a brand new AD. And being able to know I can reach out to somebody that's been 20 years in the job, and be able to help. They give me the suggestions or give me some new ideas. So I think the networking is really, really important. When we do our conferences, whether it's our Utah conference or whether it's the national conference, that is a big thing. And I mean, law, we take a law class to get our PE degrees, but it's only one law class. I try to go to his classes all the time whenever I can into Lee Green's classes, because every year it's something new. And when he came to Utah and did a PD for all of our coaches 4 years ago, coaches walked out of there going, I'm not going to coach anymore. This is too scary.
Exactly.
So I think that's one of my suggestions. And the other suggestion is for a new AD is to make sure that you reach out to the other ADs in your region and stay in contact with the ADAC rep of your region, because they're the ones that'll be able to bring you back from your board of managers things that the principals have talked about. Now, I know that there are other ADACs reps that do the board of managers themselves, but the regions that I've always been in, it's been the principals and one ADAC rep. And sometimes once the principals get back, athletics falls to the wayside because there's always a fire to put out in the building when it comes to academics. So you may have lost that. So I think it's really important, and to be involved with as much as you can, like with ADAC, be involved on committees. Doing the scholarship committee has been that I've been able to do with Ron Dolphin has been fun, because you get to know the kids that have written these great essays, and then see who wins and know that you're a part of helping them to be able to receive those scholarships. So maybe that was more than 2.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's a great answer. Let me finish up by asking you this. What questions should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
Oh, you did. I think you asked all of them that I would have. My biggest thing is I think that Title IX is really big, And it's important that our young women out there know that many of us pioneers have moved a lot of mountains for them and helped them to be able to, so that they have those opportunities they have now, and to be able to go and reach for what they want. I'm in a male dominant field. Even in accounting, when I was an accountant, I was a male dominant field. And it's fabulous that way, because you are making roadways for young women behind us that are opening doors for them.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That wraps it up for another edition of the UIAAA Connection. Once again, our guest today has been Missy Mackay-Whiteurs, CAA, the athletic director of the Salt Lake City School. Thanks for being on, Missy.
Thank you, Mark.
Appreciate you. And for our listeners, tune in next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.